Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights, the final part of my conversation with Mark Armour and Jason Schwartz. Thanks sponsors, Topps, Upper Deck, and Panini, Heritage Auctions, Huggins Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, ComC.com, and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. So this is the final part with those guys, and here it is.
I was a teenager when you were making these trades, but the thing I objected to later wasn't so much that the first cards were worth more, because I had the sense that older cards were worth more. Like, further you go back, the more fun it is. But what I really objected to was that multiplayer cards counted. I remember arguing with a friend, you can't count the 63 rows as like a real, that's not really a rose. The 64 rows is the first card. Of course, I lost that argument. Ultimately, I still make that argument to people, but it doesn't get me anywhere.
What you do and what people have done in exactly that situation is aggressively pursue the 64 rows.
Yeah, exactly.
64 rows really has a following all of its own. It's not confusion, because I think the juries come in and the 63 rows is considered the true rookie card, but the 64 card has additional demand because it's his first full card, the rookie trophy. So we're hearing you. It's just that the rookie card train has left the station. And
totally agree. And the other problem I had and still have is that as a set guy, all of a sudden it became 10 times harder to complete that set than it had been before it got the up arrows. And not just with Rose, but even with like the Bob Uecker rookie cards. It's all the rookie cards. I was more of a supply guy, I guess. And so were you a set guy when you were?
Everybody was a set guy in the 70s. Nowadays, people do quests, and so they're completing groups, but it could be the rainbow or a player or a team or something like that. But in the 70s, when I came up, it was getting sets. And you really were judged by what sets you were working on, what sets you had. It was assumed that there was a pecking order. You get these sets, then you get these sets, and you get these sets. And if you're really an advanced collector, this is what you're working on. You could sell or trade duplicates, but if you really were worth your salt, you were working on pre-war cards or the food issue, hot dog cards, things like that, really tough. Scarcity, caramel cards, any of the tea cards. So the pecking order of collectors was based on what they had. But Lou Lipsett is the first one I really remember coming out being a type card collector. A number of years after that, but a contemporary of mine. But he had this exotic taste of 19th century stuff. He would have gone crazy if he were trying to complete all those sets, because they're not even known. There was no pop reports or anything like that. And so he did that, but that is the exception. Most of the guys, you're going to get all the tops, then you're going to get all the Bowmans, then you're going to get all the play balls, then you get all the Gaudies, then you're going to work on your T206, and it's okay if you don't have a Wagner or a Plank. You're going to do the hot dog cards. You're going to do Cracker Jacks. It depends on what you want to be. You're always working on something. There were a few guys that said, I'm limiting it to Philadelphia Phillies. But I don't hear that very much anymore. Occasionally, Huggins and Scott over the years would have somebody that had all the Baltimore Orioles, and they would put them out in the auctions. And that was cool. But in the 60s and 70s, you were trying to get complete sets. They'd have plastic albums and things like that, and pretty easy to just put them in numerical order, unless it was the
first set you put together.
The first set I completed, probably 59, 60, 61, those I completed. Right. And then I started working my way forward and back when I got in the organized national hobby in the early 70s, and I picked up a 72 set, a 73 set from the person that put them together at the time. Then I'd start working my way back. And when you'd buy a collection, you'd get 2/3 of a set, and then you'd finish the rest. And I had the old-fashioned want list on a piece of paper. These are the numbers I need for these sets.
Right.
You knew what they were just because there weren't as many cards in those days.
Mike Ehrenstein was telling a story about how back in the day when other collectors would travel to New York and just hang out in his basement and work on their sets together, you would, of course, trade somebody or Joe DiMaggio for a Zeke Bonura. If you had doubles on Joe DiMaggio and you needed Zeke Bonura for your set, they'd have these gatherings and everything was great. Guys were making terrific progress on their sets. And then this young guy showed up, like around 1970 or 71 or something. This younger guy showed up and crashed the party and said, I'm paying $2 for Joe DiMaggio. I'm paying $1 for Ted Williams. I'm paying $3 for Lou Gehrig. And guys were like, oh, wow. But it ruined the whole thing.
Yeah, that was probably inevitable, Jason.
Like when Mark said the 63 rows made it tough to complete the 63 set. Here was this one guy that all of a sudden made it challenging now to complete your set if you needed anybody very good.
Those were simpler days. It wasn't sporting for you to have these extras and somebody needed it, but it also wouldn't be sporting to only pick out the Gem Mint cards. People didn't like that, or to only pick out the superstars. It wasn't considered good form. You were supposed to complete the set. And it wasn't calling their bluff, but I've been over to some of the great collections and they're going to walk you through and they couldn't say, oh, I can't show you that. If it's something obscure, they were going to show it to you and you'd see in the 9-pocket sheet, there'd be one thing missing. He said, that's the card I need. They were demonstrating to a fellow collector. I've seen some great collections where they're just paging through this stuff. I don't remember anybody exaggerating. Frank Nagy, I went over to his house. He had 6 sets of 52 tops with the high numbers. And I said, Frank, I'd like to see those. He said, they're in those drawers there. I'll be back in a minute. I'm going to get a beer or something. He goes to the other part of the house. I pull out these drawers and there's 6 drawers and they're all nice condition, just crazy. So there was a level of trust, but they probably worth hundreds of dollars at the time, not thousands or hundreds of thousands. But still, nobody likes to get pilfered, even if it would be petty larceny there. I had cards stolen from me, when cards that are worth $50 now that were worth 50 cents then, and somebody takes a big hunk of them, that you could think that I lose $50 or $5,000. I'm choosing to hold on to the bitterness of losing $5,000. For these young guys, the 2 of them distracted me while the other one palmed it off. I'm convinced they were hanging out, they were looking at that stuff, and they never looked me in the eye after that.
Oh, wow.
Am I bitter?
Wow.
Just remember, you gotta hold on to your stuff. And basically, there's still stuff that goes on. But 99.9% of the people in the industry and the hobby are just wonderful, great friends, guys you'd want to hang out with. And Sabres probably like that too. There's a few goofballs sometimes, but they love baseball, they love cards. It's been fabulous.
No, I agree on both counts. Jason and I are in this group in Sabre. Sabre has like its own sort of cards subcommittee. Yeah. Wonderful people, really just kind people that actually think baseball is fun.
Old time baseball, actually. In fact, I prefer the older hobby that was kinder and gentler and simpler, but I can't turn back the clock no matter how hard I try.
I think Gary V asked you something similar when you were talking to him, but here you were very active in the 70s, doing a lot of buying, doing a lot of collecting. By 79 or something, I think you had your first price guide out. But
yes.
Was there some sign where you saw maybe a little earlier than others, holy cow, this thing's going to get huge. I better buy those Ramleys I still need now because they may triple in price if I don't hustle. Was there anything that told you, hey, things are really ramping up in a crazy way?
2 ways to respond. One, I never turned down a Ramley in my life. So it's not these Ramleys are going to go up. No, if I saw a Ramley, I bought it. If I saw something, and mainly you're talking about wholesale, if I buy a collection of interesting stuff, I always bought it. I didn't think, hey, this is really going to go up, I'm going to buy it. I thought, I just want the cards. I'm going to pay a fair price, I'm going to get it. So that was one part of it. And the other thing is, in my company, one of the things I think that preserved my sanity, again, having great teammates really helped. And my sister was one of my key employees that came pretty early on and just did great. She's the youngest of 5. I'm the oldest of 5. And we got along great. She could finish some of my sentences. But she was the one that said, hey, this is really taking off. It's going to get to X. And I said, I don't manage that way. I said, I manage by direction. We are going in the right direction. It is getting bigger. I acknowledge that. It's going to continue to get bigger until at such point, maybe it doesn't continue to get bigger. But for the foreseeable future, and we probably were on a rocket ship, we doubled every year for 7 years in a row. So fasten your seatbelts. But I never thought it's going to go to X. When she'd say it's going to go to X, it did. We got up to 1 million copies that we were selling every month of just the baseball magazine. We were equal to Forbes magazine in terms of our paid circulation, not just circulation, but paid circulation. I had no aspiration for that. I just thought, I'm going to work hard. We're going in the right direction. We're bullish. But how it impacted our company is I didn't budget on what we thought we were going to bring in next year. I budgeted based on what we brought in last year. When you're in a growth like that, we would be a year behind. Consequently, we were not worried that we had to meet targets. No, we were going to keep doing a great job promoting, selling, marketing, all that stuff. And we grew and grew. And finally, we plateaued. That was an adjustment for me. But if you remember, this is pre-baseball strike and the end of the junk wax era. It just had grown as much as it could grow. And we had diversified, some of which worked, some of which didn't work as well. So I wasn't pushing that we've got to get to X number of dollars as a company or X number of employees or X circulation. It was just, we want to meet the needs. I was a collector. I wanted to put out magazines that were something that I would like. And so any card I bought, I thought, right now, this is worth more than what I'm paying. So I didn't think, hey, this is a $100 card right now, but I think it's going to be a $200 card next year. I never did that. I said, this is a $200 card. They're offering it for 100. How many do you have? So that's what I did. So I would always be in arrears, but I had a steady stream of cards I could buy. Nobody was saying, you're paying too low. No, that's great, because liquidity was not as big a deal. It was a big deal in that it wasn't as prevalent. So I'd run out of money. And that's the only reason I sold cards. Plus I worked. And it's a great part-time hobby. I have a day job with benefits and all that. And I did consulting on the side anyway. So I really burned my candle at both ends. The end result is I have a great collection and built a really nice company that's living on, but without me, which is a little interesting.
Mostly the days of tremendous attic finds have thinned out. Right? You still hear about some. Do you believe somewhere out there's still T206 Wagners to be discovered? Or do you think we've kind of seen all the ones there are?
If it's a bet, yes or no, will there be a new Wagner found or not? I'd bet on yes, there's another one out there. But are there another 60 out there? No, there's 60 out there right now. And they've trickled in. There were 50 known back in the 70s. So we'd go to the hospitality rooms, and the old timers, which is now anybody older than me, I think, would quote who had the cards and the pedigree. They could go around the room and they could list where all the Wagners were, who had them. And Ehrenstein was not a hog. He had 3 of them at one time. So there were some really savvy people out there. And but it wasn't just that, the knowledge, those basement things Mike did and the hospitality rooms of the early 70s, there was so much knowledge in the room, and they wouldn't disclose it to non-fraternity members. You had to be in the know. Your price of admission is to not be an idiot, to be sharp, to come in and to offer some exchange of information. And I was a sponge. So I'd go into all these shows. And so all of a sudden I could go toe to toe with these guys, but I was soaking it up and I was giving and receiving. So when it came time to do a price guide, I was ready to go. I had the sources, I had my own experience, and I had great relationships with the top dealers. And you could do that in the 70s. Nowadays, how do you find out all these influencers and pin them down? It's very chaotic. There's a lot of data out there, but it's hard to synthesize it. Back in the day, there were a few very influential dealers. They didn't corner the market, but they were trendsetters. If they put out something at a higher price, either it stuck or it didn't stick. And if it didn't stick, well, then they were just being too aggressive. And they were smart to find at the time, because now all those prices look way too cheap. But at the time, they could see what the optimum price was that allows you to sell.
Do you have today vintage sets you think of as very underrated?
I don't think of it that way anymore, Jason.
Yeah.
I'm not a price guide guy anymore. I just think a lot of things are overrated. What's overrated, I think, when something gets in an unnatural, great condition for a pre-war card, it gets so stretched out of shape value-wise. But it's like Mark was saying about the 63 Pete Rose, is that it's too late. The hobby is established, that people will pay what they'll pay. And they've fallen in love with the latest comps instead of trying to figure out what should it be worth? What should it sell for? Not what's the most it sold for in the past when two wealthy people were bidding it way up as if it was the last card in the world. I think people that have a big wad of cash looking to blow it all on one card, to me, that's not the collecting that in the 70s it was about putting together sets. So to spend too much money on one card would mean you couldn't buy another 100 cards that would be more popularly priced.
I used to think if I had $10,000 to spend, would I rather have a single $10,000 card, 10,000 $1 cards, or $100 cards? And it was always $100 cards. That'd be the most fun for me. They'd all be awesome. I think once you have 10,000, it's almost too many cards to enjoy, but 100's perfect.
That's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm doing the 10,000 $1 cards because
these days, you're the king of the dollar box these
I'm
days.
saying, I mean, I'd be happy.
The man in the house of cards is doing